Okay, settle down, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Shawnee Mission Unitarian Universalist Church. If you're here for the very first time, we call this place SMUUCh. So if you're approached by someone who says, "Welcome to SMUUCh," they are not inviting you to kiss. Although between consenting adults, anything is possible. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. We are all journeyers here. We may not be on the same path, we may not use the same map, and we may not have the same destination, but we covenant, we promise to help each other along the way, or to stay out of each other's way, and to provide a safe place for all travelers. Now let's take a moment to say hello to old friends, new friends, and especially anyone who may be with us for the first time. Remember, we were all newcomers once. And if you're joining us for the first time or joining us on the chat, on the video, please say hi. We now invite everyone to rise and greet each other.
Good morning. I am excited to announce that I will be teaching a course this spring called Mapping Inequality, the History and Present-Day Impacts of Redlining in the Greater Kansas City Area. In the late 1930s, a homeowners loan corporation created redlining maps of city neighborhoods using 4 colors: blue, green, yellow, and red. Those neighborhoods with predominantly black, brown, and low-income families were outlined in red. Those neighborhoods with predominantly white, wealthier families were outlined in blue. These maps indicated to banks which neighborhoods were best, blue, or hazardous, red, which meant not worthy of investment due to the racial makeup of their residents. Federal housing policies like redlining, blockbusting, and the resulting white flight to suburbs caused cities to segregate, sealing generations of black families into poverty. While the practice of redlining ended in 1968, the US still largely reflects the racial segregation of the 1940s. Individuals living in formerly redlined neighborhoods are more likely to have lower health outcomes, attend poorly funded schools, and be exposed to higher levels of air and water pollutants. This 6-week course will examine the history and present-day impacts of redlining in our area. Participants will demonstrate a deeper understanding of US history and the legacy of redlining in contemporary social issues, and learn alternative models and how we can participate in new policies and practices that could undesign the red line. I hope you can join me for this course. It will start April 10th, I believe. You can find the course sign up through Realm. It's featured in the newsletter, and I forgot my password to Facebook. It locked me out, but I hear Haley is going to post it on our SMUUCh Facebook and Instagram, so you can find information there too. And now we have an announcement from Jim.
Well, this coming Tuesday will be the first day of spring. If you enjoy gardening like I do and would like to serve the church in some way by caring for our ornamental gardens, please consider joining us Tuesday mornings beginning March 26th from 9 a.m. to 11. The ornamental gardens that I'm talking about include the area just outside the north entrance, the axe-shaped island out in the north parking lot, which we call Axe Island, and is planted to wildflowers, the shrub border around the labyrinth, and the meditation garden just south of the office on the east side of the building. Gardening skill is not required. We'll teach you what you need to know to care for annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees. In fact, you can make your mistakes here so you can do it right at home. If Tuesday mornings don't work for your schedule, you or your family can adopt an area somewhere on the grounds and care for it this season on your own schedule. If you're interested in helping and have any questions, I'll be in the foyer after the service. We can take a walk outside. I'll show you the areas and give you an idea what needs to be done. It's not difficult work. Next, and finally, you may notice that our accompanist, Ben Havey, is not with us today. He is traveling to Chicago for an international piano competition. So let's all give him a good mojo as he's doing this.
Come, let us worship. Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 61 in the gray hymnal, Lo, the Earth Awakens Again. As Reverend Naya comes forward to light the chalice,
We invite you to join us as we recite our covenant. Let us affirm that love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another. Each month, we as a community take time to reflect on a theme. The children do this in their classes, and we do it in our small groups and in the Sunday service. The monthly themes are part of the Soul Matters program, and they're listed on the Soul Matters bulletin board in Fellowship Hall. If a monthly theme resonates deeply with you, and you would like to provide a theme reflection some Sunday, please let us know. This month, the theme is transformation. When I reflect on transformation, I think of change with a capital C. At any given point in time, we generally think of ourselves and the things around us as static. Things are in a state of stasis, or balance, or equilibrium, and pretty much remain as they are. And any change, especially a change with capital C, would have to be something triggered or initiated by some internal or external force. The surface of the pond is still until I toss a pebble into the water. Then the smooth surface is transformed into a pattern of ever-increasing circular ripples. Well, that's one way to look at things, but only one way. As I reflect on transformation, it seems to me that stasis is not the norm. Change is the norm. Transformation is the norm. Consider for a moment motion. I'm standing here, and you're sitting there. Are we moving? Maybe a little, as we inhale and exhale, or check our cell phones, or fidget in our seats. We are mostly still, right? Wrong. Fasten your seatbelts. It may seem that we are stationary, but we are not. We may think that we are standing or sitting still, but right now, our planet is rotating at a rate of 1,038 miles per hour. At the same time, our planet is revolving around the sun at a rate of 66,488 miles per hour. At the same time, our solar system orbits the center of our galaxy at about 450,000 miles per hour. And at the same time, our galaxy journeys through the cosmos as the universe expands at some 1.37 million miles per hour. Sort of makes your head spin when you think about it. And kids, the next time an adult tells you to be still, just tell them, well, that's just impossible. Sorry, adults. Whether we feel it or not, we are all in constant motion, hurtling through space in a multitude of ways. We are also hurtling through time. And whether we feel it or not, we and everything around us are in a state of constant change. Change with a capital C. Transformation. We and everything around us are forever transforming, moving from one form to another. Over 1 million years, glaciers crept over North America and transformed the landscape, carving out valleys, creating mountains, lakes, and streams. In a season, debris on the forest floor decomposes, becoming life-giving compost and nourishing the next generation of plants, shrubs, and trees. Our very cells, the cells of our skin, are replaced every 2 to 3 weeks. And as we pass on the arc from child to adulthood, our understanding and attitudes change from knowing nothing to knowing something to knowing a lot to knowing everything to knowing nothing again. Deep down, I think we all understand this, whether we admit it or not, that all this, is not a snapshot. It's an animation. Frame by frame, small movements happen in everything, everywhere, all the time. You know this, don't you? Transformation is the ground of our being. We are transforming beings that exist in a transforming universe. We are in constant state of becoming something else. And it's messy, and it's hard, and it's scary, and it hurts. But it's also honest, and beautiful, and inspiring, and it can feel really, really good. So remember, the pond may appear still, but there's a lot going on under the surface.
All right, at this time, I'd like to invite all the children to come forward to join me for Time for All Ages. Hello, welcome. Ooh, I like your peak. Is that Pikachu? Nice. Hi, Sammy. Hi, Sammy. All right, as Jim mentioned, our month's theme is transformation. Raise your hand if you've been noticing any flowers blooming, maybe in your yard or around the church. Yep, I see some hands. Yeah, when I think of transformation, I think about spring. So today I brought a bunch of seeds because seeds know a lot about transformation. Who can tell me what a seed needs? We'll pass these around. What does a seed need in order to transform into a plant? Yeah? Water, dirt, sun. Yes. Nutrients. All right, there. Water. There's one more thing it needs. Yeah. We said dirt. I think, yeah. Sun. We're missing one. Yeah. Mud helps. Seeds actually need just two things to open up and start to become a plant, and that is air and water. Reverend Naya has been teaching us a lot about love recently and how when we are grounded, like seeds, in love, we can transform ourselves in the world around us. But growing our love can be difficult because love requires us to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a big word, but I think it just means to be open, to open our hearts and minds, just like a seed opens and begins to grow or transform into a plant. So when we open our hearts in our minds, we are also transformed. But vulnerability, opening ourselves up to new things, new ideas, new people, that can be really scary. It could be an emotional experience. And sometimes when we're emotional, when we open ourselves up to others to experience love, sometimes we cry. Anyone in here ever cried before? I hope so. Some people maybe need a good cry today, and that's okay. When we were babies, we all cried a lot. Do you know about crying, Sammy? Maybe a little? But when we get older, sometimes we are taught that we shouldn't cry, or maybe not so much. But crying is good. Many of you here have seen me cry multiple times. When I was little and I would cry, I would sometimes forget to breathe. Has anyone ever cried so much where you're like, and you just like, yes, okay. Thank you, Twyla, for, wasn't just me. And my mom would say in the calmest voice, Jennifer, breathe. When we are vulnerable, when our minds and hearts are open, we are also the most open to learning and transforming, changing. Raise your hand if you have ever observed something so beautiful that it made you cry. Raise your hand if you have ever shared your feelings and you cried. We remember those moments. Those moments are transformative. Vulnerability is, I'm getting ahead of myself. I've participated in many church services in almost the 2 years I've been here, and I can't remember them all. But I remember all the services when I was vulnerable, when I opened myself up to you and I shared my thoughts and feelings with you, when there may have been a few tears and maybe I had to pause to catch my breath. Vulnerability is like an opening to transformation. Just as seeds need water and air to open and transform, we humans also need water and air. The tears we shed and the deep breaths we take during vulnerable moments are the same drops of water and the same air molecules that seeds need for their own transformation. So as you watch the earth open itself up during this spring season to change, know that you are also part of this transformative miracle. So take a deep breath, drink your water, and maybe shed a few tears. All right, did you have something you wanted to share? Yep, she mentioned that seeds, while we think that they're not alive, they are. They're just in a dormant stage, and they just need some water and air, and then a miracle occurs, right? Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to keep talking about transformation in our classes, so please join me in singing the children out.
Why we lift
This is why, this is why we sing.
Doesn't the choir sound great? We come to this place to see and to be seen, to teach and to be taught, to hear and to be heard. We also come to this place to share our joys and sorrows. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, I now invite you to come forward and light a candle. You can share what's in your heart or on your mind in 1 or 2 sentences. You can share with a single word, or you can share in silence and simply light a candle.
My name is Ted Thompson. I was standing here in remembrance of Rachel Corey 21 years ago on March 16, 2003. She was protesting the demolition of Palestinian homes, and a bulldozer actually ran over her and killed her. 21 years ago, we were still in SMUUCh in the Barn Chapel down on 87th Street across from South Lake Park, but I know that day several of us were talking about that event.
I'm Barbara Shepard, and I'm lighting this candle in memory of Kevin Donahue. Kevin passed away in his sleep this past week, and he's the son of Gloria Donahue Little, who was a member of this church and is a really good friend of mine. So.
Hi, I'm Twyla Preston, and I have the best neighbors. It's a couple of guys that live next to me, and they shovel my walk, they fertilize and mow my front yard, I think because they want it to look good, and I give them food and vegetables and stuff like that. Well, anyway, I learned last Sunday that Jimmy has cancer and is in the hospital. He was there for a whole week, but he's home now, and we are just hoping for the best.
There is a friend that I love very much, and there are many things that I cannot say, but what I can say, if not to them in spirit, but to many other people like us who have struggled similarly. When you struggle with yourself and you don't know if it's worth staying, remember that when you think about the universe and how big it is, how massive, a galaxy is only one of trillions of other galaxies within other arms of webs of this universe. You are nothing in comparison. And yet, your own bodies are filled with little microorganisms and cells. By the trillions, you are more than a god to those cells. You are in perfect balance between everything and nothing. The meaning of life is to find and create a life worth living and find meaning within itself. Power is found by putting permission in your choice. Your choice is valid. I love you, and please come back.
I will light the remaining candles for the joys and sorrows that were unspoken today, but that remain in the silent sanctuary of our hearts.
Let us take a moment to come fully into this place. Now, reach over and nudge the person sitting next to you. We're here together, gathered in peace and authenticity and intention. Put your feet flat on the floor and take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable and relax into your chair. Allow your breathing to deepen beautifully. Wiggle your jaw and melt. Notice an area that is tense or tight and embrace it. And say, relax. It's okay to relax. Let the bustle of getting here melt away and come into this space of holiness. Please remain seated for our meditative hymn, number 396, I Know This Rose Will Open.
Our reading today is from Audre Lorde, and it goes like this. In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear. Fear of contempt, of censure, or some judgment, or recognition, of challenge, of annihilation. But most of all, I think we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. And that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable, is that which also is the source of our greatest strength.
Good morning, everyone. I first want to thank you for my time in standing for Reverend Rose. Y'all have been amazing and welcoming and embracing, and so I want to thank you for that. When I first came to this church back in 2022, I did not know what to expect. As I shared before, I was carrying with me some significant church hurt, and I wanted nothing to do with the church. And my wife, who was my fiance at the time, got hired on and would come back telling me how much I would love coming here. And we would get in arguments because I felt like she was trying to force me to come here. But every Sunday, like clockwork, she would come back telling me about Rev Rose's sermons and how much I would enjoy them. She would talk about you, the people, who she would have conversations with, and how there were other queer folks like us who resonated with us, that they haven't always been accepted at church. So I finally caved. I decided to come to the coming out service that celebrated the LGBTQIA plus community. And I had no idea what to expect. I was nervous and very intrigued. I have never been to a church that celebrated us like this. And however, as I sat there where Jen is sitting right back there, I took in the service, and I remember the feeling that I felt. The feeling I didn't know my body was hungry for. I felt seen. Have you ever felt like this? Maybe you felt like this here at SMUUCh. Or maybe you felt it when a trusted friend or partner or family member or teacher or boss stopped time because they saw you. Or maybe you feel it when you see a baby smiling back at you and the joy that brings because they finally see you. Or when you're listening to music and the melody and the lyrics just resonate with you so deeply that you feel seen. This feeling of being seen is one that we as humans long for. And this feeling of being seen requires something that we've been talking about all service. You got it, vulnerability. And the question that we will walk through together for the next 10 and 15 minutes is this: how do we let vulnerability transform us? How do we access that feeling of being seen? Well, first, we let vulnerability transform us by learning what it's not. In 2013, researcher and storyteller Brené Brown became the most watched TED Talk. And what was it about? You guessed it, vulnerability. And this was groundbreaking because no one on the popular level was talking about vulnerability in the way that was accessible for all people to grasp. I mean, yes, there were Black and brown folks talking about vulnerability. There were theorists talking about vulnerability if you were studying to be a mental health therapist, but nothing like the way Brené Brown was actually synthesizing the information and allowing people to truly grasp what vulnerability is. And in her book, Daring Greatly, she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's that unstable feeling we get when we step out of our comfort zone or do something that forces us to loosen control. Now, I don't know about y'all, but everything in me wants to avoid feeling anything that's uncertain, anything that's a risk, and anything that's going to be emotionally exposing. In fact, we go through life hoping we don't get exposed, right? Like when the teacher called on you to read aloud and your stomach is in knots because you don't want to mispronounce the word. Or when they call on you to say, what's 2 times 2? And you're in your mind, 2 times 2, 4, 4 times 4, 16, right? And you're trying to make sure you get the right answer. Or when you get called on to answer a question on the exam. We avoid eye contact because we don't want to be exposed. We don't look at the teacher, whoever is asking us the question, in hopes that we're not the ones called on. Or maybe we avoid the hard conversation we need to have because of the uncertainty, because of the risk. However, what ends up happening is that we settle for a pseudo-vulnerability. We settle for what vulnerability is not. It leads us to believe the lie that what vulnerability is just me telling you about facts about my life. And then we force others to be vulnerable, which really means demanding them to be open just because we asked for it. Or we ask those that are on the margins to tell us their experience, only to come back with facts about how their experience is not really true because it doesn't align with what I know to be true. And we use vulnerability as a weapon, making people open up about things so that we can feel better about ourselves. And we tear other people down, we compare ourselves to each other, we envy each other, all because we want to protect ourselves from exposure, protect ourselves from risk. However, Brené Brown states that protecting ourselves from vulnerability is counterproductive because to be vulnerable is to be human. Have you ever thought about how you and I enter the world? Just last year, my wife's best friend gave birth to a little girl. Now, obviously, I wasn't there for the labor part, but we did go to the hospital the day after to see the baby. I remember walking into the room and holding that baby for the first time. She was perfect. She didn't know me. She had no ability to say no to me. She couldn't talk. She couldn't feed herself. In fact, she couldn't even protect herself. And as I held her, she was laying in my arms, exposed, uncertain, and at risk, vulnerable. And I was met with responsibility of making sure that her interaction with me in that moment was one where she was safe and one where she was seen. Friends, we start our lives vulnerable. And I know that depending on what we experience in this life, the pain, the broken trusts, the heartbreaks, it is much harder for us to risk, and for good reason. It is much easier to protect, and sometimes we need to, depending on the context we find ourselves in. However, vulnerability is not me sharing everything just because you asked. Vulnerability is not a tool you use to make sure people do what you want them to do. Vulnerability is not just facts about someone's life, and actually vulnerability is rooted in the belief that we are worthy and beautiful simply because we exist. Vulnerability starts with the belief that you and I are good, that you and I are worthy of love, and that you and I matter. So we let vulnerability transform us by learning what it's not. Well, how else do we allow it to transform us? Well, lastly, we let vulnerability transform us by allowing ourselves to experience what it is. In the 1997 movie Good Will Hunting, we are introduced to this guy named Will. And in the beginning of the movie, we find out that Will is a janitor at this school because he was got in some trouble and was on parole. And however, we learned that the guy everyone thought was unlikely to be a genius was, in fact, a genius. I mean, Will can solve the unsolvable math problems the professor has been trying to solve. And as a result, the professor wanted him to work for him. And Will wasn't trying to have all that, and so Will does get in trouble again, though. And to avoid going to jail, the court agreed that Will would need to work for the professor and attend therapy sessions. And if you've seen the movie, you know that the first therapy session seemed like a failure. They just sit there in silence, looking at the clock until it was time to be done. And Sean, his therapist, doesn't force him to be open and doesn't just ask for facts about his life. In fact, he lets Will move at his own pace, even if that meant Will was being a little mean. And this is a pattern you see throughout the film. But as the audience, you and I get to see that Will has had a painful life. That he had been trying to fix a problem within himself by protecting himself from everyone else. And we learned that he had an abusive stepfather, that he was scared to commit to a relationship because he knew that he would eventually get hurt. And then there's this scene towards the end where Sean, the therapist, and Will are in therapy. And Sean, his therapist, decides to disclose how he grew up with an alcoholic father and how horrible it was. And Will starts to disclose how his stepfather would also beat him. Will then starts to ask Sean if he has attachment disorders, really poking at the question, what's wrong with me? Can you tell me what's wrong with me? And Sean stops and tells Will to look at him, holding the file of all his notes about his life. And Sean tells Will to look at him. And then he tells Will, it's not your fault. Will says, he knows, I know. And Sean repeats, it's not your fault. Will repeats, I know, stop doing this, Sean. And Sean says, no, son, you don't. It's not your fault. Will tries to push Sean away, but Sean gets closer and says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And Will breaks down sobbing. Because maybe for Will, he finally was able to experience the transforming power of vulnerability. I don't know what you all have experienced in life. I don't know the pains, the hurts, the stories that cause you to not want to be seen. I don't know the lies you've been told or the ways your vulnerability has been used against you. But what I do know is that when we are able to see that what happened to us, that what people have done to us was not your fault, then we are able to see that you and I are worthy of connection and belonging, that we can choose our boundaries and we can choose who we want to be vulnerable with. And it's in that experience that transforms us, just like it transformed Will. When we allow ourselves to experience the risk of uncertainty and emotional exposure in safe spaces, in safe contexts, with safe people, it transforms us. And as Audre Lorde stated earlier, in the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear, fear of contempt, of censure, or some judgment or recognition of challenge, of annihilation. But most of all, I think we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. And that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable, is that which also is the source of our greatest strength. Amen.
The work of the church depends on us, our generosity of time, wisdom, and financial resources. We invite you to give generously to support the ongoing work of the church. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared values. Please join me in thanking our guest musicians, Sasha at the cello and Iona at the piano. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way.
Building
find those safe spaces where you are able to risk, be a little uncertain, and open yourself to the possibility of transformation. Go in peace.